The digital clock on the mahogany desk, a monstrously expensive piece from Milan, glowed for 30 p.m. for Michael Brown, a man whose net worth now comfortably exceeded $500 million. 4:30 p.m. was the apex of the productive day. The moment efficiency reports were finalized and decisions that affected thousands of employees were rendered with the swift, cold efficiency of a surgical laser. Michael, 43 years old and possessing the chiseled, slightly tired handsomeness that suggested constant, relentless ambition, ran Brown Global Tech, a name synonymous with disruptive innovation in cloud computing. His office on the 65th floor of a skyscraper in downtown Seattle afforded him a panoramic view of the Puget Sound, a vista he barely registered anymore, preferring the glow of the 3 4K monitors arranged in a severe arc around his ergonomic chair. Today, however, a minor irritation, a tiny grain of sand in the immense, perfectly oiled machine of his life, demanded his attention. He picked up his bespoke titanium case phone. The purpose of the call was simple and distasteful. Terminate the employment of one Maria Davis, his personal live-out chef. Maria, 47 years old, had been an employee for nearly 7 years, reliably managing the dietary needs of a man whose consumption of calories was as meticulously scheduled as his board meetings. To Micah, this wasn't mere absence. It was an act of insubordination against the sacred principle of reliability. In his world, excuses were the vocabulary of failure. He didn't fire people out of malice. He fired them out of systemic necessity. He tapped the screen, dialing the number listed on her HR file. The call connected instantly, but the expected slightly breathless. Hello. Mr. was replaced by a strange, metallic static, followed by a deeply unfamiliar voice. This is Engine Company 27. Michael frowned, leaning back in his chair, the leather squeaking faintly beneath his weight. His mind immediately ran through the possible unhighly. Had he dialed the wrong number? Impossible. He had manually copied it from the corporate directory seconds ago. This is Michael Brown. I'm calling Maria Davis. Michael's tone was sharp, a low rumble of annoyance that usually precipitated immediate cooperation. The man on the other end, whose voice was deep, steady, and utterly unfazed by the obvious authority in Michael's tone, paused. Mr. Brown, I'm Lieutenant Stephen Thomas. I'm with the Seattle Fire Department. We were dispatched to this residence about 40 minutes ago. Is your relationship with Ms.? A sudden, cold pinprick of alarm went through Michael Fire Department residence. Yes, she is my employee. What ... What happened? His calculated annoyance gave way to a nascent, unexpected fear. His life was organized to eliminate unpredictability, and this call was a direct violation of that order. I can't disclose specifics over the phone, sir, but I can tell you this. Ms. Davis is not in a position to speak with you or anyone else. She was transported to Harborview Medical Center approximately 20 minutes ago. Lieutenant Thomas S. voice was professional, devoid of unnecessary emotion, which only amplified the gravity of the situation. We're just clearing the scene now. There's been a significant carbon monoxide leak in the home. Michael's meticulous world carbon monoxide, the silent killer. He stared blankly at his immaculate desk. The thought of his call a call to coldly dismiss a woman for too sick days now felt grotesque, an act of almost cosmic cruelty. He thought of Maria, her quiet competence, the way she always knew his coffee preference without asking, her slightly worn but always spotless uniform. He had reduced her existence to an entry in an attendance log. Michael asked, the words catching slightly in his throat, a sensation he hadn't experienced since his father's funeral a decade ago. She is, sir. But it's Tuchango. We administered oxygen and CPR on site before the ambulance took over. The exposure was severe. Her son, 15-year-old, Kevin Perez, was also ill. He's stable, but terrified. He was taken with her. Look, sir, you need to understand the level of distress here. Lieutenant Thomas sighed, the sound of heavy, professional exhaustion. He's been trying to call people from the lobby phone at the hospital. I told him I'd hold on to his mom's cell and answer anything that came in, just so he didn't have to carry that burden right now. Michael felt a profound sense of dislocation. Kevin, he vaguely recalled Maria mentioning a son, perhaps years ago, but the details were non-existent. His staff had a personal life, a necessary fact, but one he preferred to remain abstract. Now, a 15-year-old boy was alone, terrified. watching his mother struggle to breathe due to an accident in a place Michael had never seen. No, Michael heard himself say, his voice regaining some of its familiar steel. But the emotion beneath was entirely new. Don't contact anyone else. I'll go to the hospital. Harborview, you said. What is the son's name again? Yes, Kevin Perez. Look, Mr. Brown, I don't know your business with her, but if you go, please be sensitive. The kid is alone. He needs a familiar face, even if it's just his mom's boss. And frankly, her living situation. It looked rough. The heating unit was a total hazard. The lieutenant's implication was clear. Poverty was the underlying cause. Michael ended the call, the silence of his vast office suddenly deafening. He looked at the half-finished termination letter on his computer screen, the neatly itemized list of Maria's failings. It was garbage. He stood up, knocking his chair back slightly on, act of careless haste that was utterly unlike him. He didn't stop to get his jacket or tell his assistant, Amy Young, where he was going. He simply walked out of his office, his mind reeling from the immediate, undeniable realization that he was not the master of the universe. He was just a man who had almost inflicted a final, irreparable injury on a person already fighting for survival. The drive to Harborview Medical Center in his sleek black sedan, usually a study in efficient navigation, felt like an eternity. The traffic lights seemed to mock his new, desperate urgency. Asterisk, go faster, Michael. Asterisk, when he finally arrived, the hospital stood. Fluorescent lit halls felt like a world away from the gleaming wood and glass of brown global tech. He found Kevin Perez huddled in a stiff plastic chair in the intensive care waiting area. The boy was small for his age, dressed in a faded sweatshirt that looked too thin for the late November chill. His eyes, red-rimmed and hollow, glanced up at Michael with a mixture of confusion and guarded hope. Michael approached slowly, remembering Lieutenant Thomas's counsel to be sensitive. Kevin, I'm Michael Brown. Kevin nodded once, clutching a small, worn backpack. The firefighter. He said, you might come. Mom, she's in a coma, Mr. Brown. Tears welled up instantly, but the boy stubbornly tried to blink them back. I know, Kevin, and I am so sorry this happened. Michael said, the formal language of his professional life failing him entirely. He sat down in the adjacent chair, the cheap plastic protesting under his weight. He looked at Kevin, looked asterisk at him, and saw not the abstract concept of a dependent, but a boy utterly, terribly alone. The contrast between this boy's reality and the insulated, predictable luxury of Michael's own son, Ryan Robinson, 17 and currently worrying about his college applications, struck him like a physical blow. Kevin's eyes held a maturity and pain that no 15-year-old should possess. Kevin whispered, the vulnerability finally breaking through. Michael didn't offer a corporate platitude or a false promise. I don't know, Kevin, the doctors are doing everything they can, but I am here now, and I'll stay here until we know more. This was the true turning point, the moment the CEO became something else entirely. The decision to stay was not strategic, not financial, and not logical. It was purely, unequivocally human. The immense weight of his former intention to coldly fire a woman whose life was already teetering on the edge of disaster now pressed down on him, forcing him to reckon with the moral blindness of his own success. He was no longer just here to check a box. He was here to pay a debt, not of money, but of basic human decency. The hospital's waiting room was a study in grim realism, an environment wholly foreign to Michael Brown. For the next 8 hours, he remained glued to the unforgiving plastic chair. The only light in his carefully curated life filtering through the boy beside him, Kevin, only 15, but carrying the weight of a man 3 times his age, recounted the events of the last few days in a low, monotone voice that betrayed a deep, weary trauma. He explained that his mother had been feeling unwell for weeks, suffering from blinding headaches and nausea they had initially blamed on a persistent virus. The 2 absences, the very ones that had sealed Maria's fate in Michael's internal audit, were not for common illness, but were spent trying to navigate a labyrinth of free clinics that demanded hours of waiting only to prescribe ibuprofen and rest. The carbon monoxide, it turned out, was the disastrous outcome of a broken, decades-old central heating system in their low-income housing complex. A repair request that Maria had submitted weekly to a negligent property manager, but that had been consistently ignored. The manager, he always said we were exaggerating, Kevin murmured, tracing the worn seam of his backpack with a nervous finger. He said if we wanted fancy heat, we should move to an expensive place and not bother folks who were just trying to get by. Mom was embarrassed, Mr. Brown. That's why she didn't call you or text the full truth. She was afraid you'd think she was unprofessional. The second time she was out, she was actually trying to fix the unit herself with duct tape. Michael listened, his usual hyperfocus now directed with laser-like intensity at this small, devastating narrative. Maria's quiet competence, which he had so admired and depended upon, was not the result of a life of secure professionalism, but a fierce, desperate struggle to maintain dignity in the face of crushing systemic poverty. He had confused her invisibility with a lack of personhood. He who dealt in billions now grasped the true unforgivable irony. She had risked her health and her life trying to keep the job he was about to terminate over an issue stemming from the very deprivation that job was meant to alleviate. He wanted to rage at the world, at the property manager, at his own colossal ignorance, but all that emerged was a heavy, suffocating silence. Around 1 a.m., a doctor with a name tag identifying her as Dr. Parker approached their secluded corner. Her expression was solemn. "Mr. Brown, Kevin," she began, her voice calm but firm. "Maria is stabilized, but the next 48 hours are crucial. The CO saturation level was dangerously high. We have her in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber now, trying to reverse the cellular damage. We are seeing early signs of hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy brain injury due to lack of oxygen. She has a tough fight ahead, and even if she wakes up, she will require months, possibly a year, of specialized cognitive and physical rehabilitation." Dr. Parker paused, looking directly at Michael, the implied question of financial responsibility hanging heavy in the air. Michael didn't hesitate. He pulled out his phone, not to check his bank balance, which was irrelevant, but to text Amy Young, his assistant, the instruction: liquidate $600,000 from the emergency discretionary fund. Establish a perpetual medical trust for Maria Davis. I will call the facility manager tomorrow. She is to receive the absolute highest level of care available in the state of Washington, regardless of cost. Do not question this. He looked up at Dr. Parker, his jaw set with a new, uncompromising resolution. "I will personally guarantee all costs, Doctor, every last dime." The doctor, accustomed to the financial anxieties of most patients, looked momentarily stunned by the sheer, blunt force of his wealth being deployed as a life-saving tool. "We will, Mr. Brown." After the doctor left, Michael turned to Kevin. "We need to go get some things for you and your mother. Pajamas, toiletries." The trip back to their apartment, a 40-minute drive from the bright, high-tech modernity of the hospital, was a descent into a forgotten Seattle. The building was a tired, 3-story brick structure built sometime in the 1960s, tucked away in a neglected corner of South Park. The air in the stairwell was thick with the faint, persistent smell of stale grease and disinfectant struggling to mask deeper odors. Kevin's small apartment was on the top floor. Once inside, the truth of their struggle became a brutal, visual assault. The walls were peeling, the carpet worn down to the backing in high-traffic areas, and the furniture was an assortment of mismatched, hand-me-down pieces. It was immaculate, however a testament to Maria's relentless efforts. Every surface was scrubbed clean, every item placed with careful economy, yet the underlying sense of decay was inescapable. In the small bedroom, Kevin opened a worn, wooden chest of drawers. "Mom's things are here." He pulled out a faded t-shirt and a pair of thin sweatpants, placing them reverently in his backpack. Michael noticed the heating unit, a monstrously inefficient furnace hidden behind a flimsy louvered door, now tagged with a bright yellow hazard asterisk sticker by the fire department. This was a silent weapon that had almost taken her life. As Kevin moved to pack his school books, Michael spotted a small, framed photo on a shelf of younger Maria, vibrant and smiling, holding Kevin as a toddler. Next to her in the picture was a man, handsome and broad-shouldered, clearly the boy's father. "Your father, is he local?" Michael asked, trying to keep his tone neutral, though his heart already anticipated the answer. Kevin stopped packing, his face clouding over with a familiar sorrow. "He left 5 years ago, Mr. Brown. He's not here. His name is Charles. He used to be a mechanic. He comes back sometimes, but only when he needs money. The last time was 8 months ago. He just yelled at Mom because she didn't have enough to give him. Then he took my little savings jar. Mom cried for 2 days after that. He said we were a mistake he made when he was too young. The boy spoke these devastating words with the matter-of-fact exhaustion of someone who had long since stopped fighting a painful reality. A cold, righteous fury, an emotion utterly foreign to the cool, calculated psyche of Michael Brown settled deep in his core. He thought of his own estranged father, a man whose emotional distance was a vast chasm, but whose financial support was endless. Charles was worse, a predator, exploiting the love and vulnerability of his own family. The idea that a man could casually inflict such pain that he could use his own son's existence as a tool for emotional extortion was an affront to everything Michael now realized he valued. He watched Kevin pull out a stack of well-used textbooks. "I try," Mom always said. "That's the only way out. She wants me to go to the University of Washington." Kevin managed a faint, fleeting shadow of pride. Michael looked at the boy, who possessed an intellect and a resilience forged in the fires of necessity. He saw a mirror image of the ambition he had once owned, stripped bare of the privileged safety net that had always cushioned Michael's own life. This wasn't just about paying for a chef's medical bills anymore. It was about filling a vacuum of protection, security, and consistent, unconditional male presence. The weight of his own sudden unplanned responsibility felt immense, yet exhilarating. He realized that, for the first time in years, he wasn't calculating returns or market shares. He was calculating a life. He was seeing the human value of his resources. The turning point was complete. Michael Brown was no longer an employer settling a corporate liability. He was an advocate, a protector, and perhaps a surrogate father. He grabbed a small, laminated picture of Maria and Kevin off the fridge, tucking it into his pocket. This picture and the boy were now his sole priority. Weeks blurred into a slow, agonizing vigil in the specialized neurological wing of the hospital. Michael had moved into an executive suite near the hospital campus, managing Brown Global Tech by remote delegation, ceding ground he never thought he would surrender. He dedicated his mornings to Kevin, helping him with his demanding AP Physics homework, listening to his anxieties, and ensuring he felt protected. The 15-year-old was slowly unfurling from the tight bud of fear he had been, showing flashes of a dry wit and an immense capacity for loyalty, reinforcing Michael's conviction that this boy was a singular, brilliant human being. Then, finally, after 22 days, the moment came. Kevin was sitting beside his mother, gently reading aloud from a worn copy of Moby Dick, a book Maria loved when her fingers, which had been frighteningly still beneath a sterile white sheet, twitched. A day later, her eyes fluttered open, registering the world with a slow, unfocused shock. The first few days of consciousness were a fragile mix of confusion and exhaustion. When Maria finally understood she was safe, that Kevin was unharmed, and that the person responsible for her high-end care was the formidable, ever-present man in the expensive suit who was gently feeding Kevin hospital soup, her gratitude was silent but palpable. She wept soundlessly, a deep, cleansing release of months of repressed fear and stress. Michael sat beside her, holding her hand, his own hand shaken slightly, realizing that all the money in his banks had never bought him anything as profoundly valuable as this simple moment of shared, raw human connection. He spoke to her not as an employer, but as the man who had witnessed her sacrifice. He vowed that neither she nor Kevin would ever experience that level of systemic vulnerability again. The fragile peace was shattered 2 days later. He was a man in his early 40s, his mechanics uniform stained, his face weathered, and exhibiting the telltale signs of long-term substance abuse. Charles didn't arrive out of concern. He arrived to cash in. He had heard about the millionaire paying the bills and saw Michael as a walking ATM. Michael met him in a secluded consultation room, maintaining a composure that belied the protective fire raging within him. Charles launched immediately into a theatrical performance, claiming his rights as Kevin's father and demanding a significant lump sum $150,000 was the figure he settled on to reestablish his relationship with the boy. "You think you can just swoop in and buy my family, Brown?" Charles sneered, attempting to stand toe-to-toe with the far taller, infinitely more powerful CEO. Michael didn't raise his voice. He simply pressed a button on the hidden recorder in his pocket, ensuring every threat was documented. "Mr. Ernagis," Mikhail said, using the man's full, long-forgotten surname, his voice smooth and lethally quiet. "My money, as you call it, is currently saving the life of your son's mother, a woman you abandoned 5 years ago. I have proof of multiple instances of financial coercion. Your theft of Kevin's savings and documentation of your child support arrears stretching back 3 years, which, by the way, totals nearly $40,000. I also have Lieutenant Thomas S. report on the hazardous conditions you never reported to the property manager. Though you visited the apartment often enough to harass Maria, you leave this hospital immediately. If you contact Maria, Kevin, or me, or even attempt to come within 500 feet of either of them, my legal team will ensure you face immediate prosecution for harassment and endangerment, and I will personally see that you lose every vestige of your parental rights. This is not a negotiation. Charles, realizing that the cold corporate fury of Michael Brown was far more terrifying than the poverty he was accustomed to exploiting, paled and retreated, stumbling backward out of the hospital, never to be seen or heard from again. With Charles neutralized, Michael took the most significant step of his life. He sat by Maria's bedside, waiting for a moment when Kevin was safely at a physical therapy session. He spoke softly, outlining his proposal. "Maria, you are the most courageous person I have ever met. Your love for Kevin is fierce, and it saved his life and mine. But you and I both know the life you had to lead to protect him was unsustainable. I have the resources to give Kevin everything: the best education, security, travel, and a stable future where he never has to worry about the heat turning off or where the next meal comes from. More than that, I want to give him a consistent, present father." He paused, gathering his courage. "I am asking for your permission to legally adopt Kevin. He would take my name, he would be my son, fully and legally. I would be his father. But, Maria," he emphasized, taking her hand, "you would always be his mother. You would always be a central part of his life, supported entirely, just like him. This is not about erasing you." Maria, her voice still weak, but steady, looked at the man who had literally rescued them from oblivion. She saw the genuine, transformative light in his eyes, the light of a man who had finally found his purpose. "Mr. Brown, Michael," she corrected herself, offering a weak smile. "My life's only goal was for him to escape the trap I was in. You are his path out. There is no greater gift a mother can receive than knowing her son will thrive. You have my consent completely." The legal proceedings moved with the same high-speed efficiency that characterized Brown Global Tech. With Maria's full documented consent and Charles's extensive history of neglect and abandonment serving as powerful evidence, the court finalized the adoption within 4 months. Kevin Perez officially became Kevin Brown. Michael Brown was never the same. He didn't abandon his company, but he fundamentally redefined his role within it. He installed a new capable crew and delegated the day-to-day operations, choosing to work only 4 hours a day, always making sure he was home in time to help Kevin with homework and, more importantly, to listen to the boy talk about his day. Maria, having made a remarkable but long recovery, went on to found a non-profit foundation fully funded by Michael, dedicated to providing safe housing and mentorship for single mothers in crisis in the South Seattle area. She eventually moved into a beautiful, small apartment near their home, and Kevin split his time between the two most important people in his life. Michael often stood at the window of his penthouse, looking out over the city. He no longer saw a testament to his corporate power. He saw the apartment where Maria had nearly died, the hospital where Kevin had clung to hope, and the immense, chaotic human ecosystem that he had once ignored. He had set out to acquire wealth, power, and success, achieving all three. But it wasn't until a firefighter answered a phone call that he finally discovered what true, non-negotiable wealth was: the love of a son, the gratitude of a friend, and the profound, humbling privilege of building a new life. He realized that the greatest asset he had ever acquired was not a technology company, but the title of father.